Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Morning Magazine for this March 23rd, 2022. You have your host, James J. Malouf, here at 10:30. We're going to welcome in our friends from the ODC. We have Stephanie Hartman and Callie Johnson joining us. We're going to talk a little milkweed market and some other fun stuff. Right now, in our first guest of the day, Lance Pliml, chairman of the Wood County Board. Always good to see you, Lance. Thanks for being in.
Hey, James, thanks for having me. And this is my first time in your brand new studios. These are fantastic.
I want to talk about that.
Got a tour of the building when I walked in.
Right on.
Yeah, pretty nice digs over here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to show. We're glad to have you here. And also want to say a shout out to our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media, in particular Kev, who it's our last time we're going to have Kev in studio with us. But we're going to work together again, brother. I think so. But we want to thank you. Thank you for the great work that you've done for our community, the outstanding production, and credit you and your staff over there for everything you guys do. Encourage you to subscribe and follow them on YouTube. It's a great work and a great way to stay informed. And not just for locals, but I know that we were talking beforehand in our pregame. We just mentioned 3 different states of people watching the YouTube videos out of state. So, yeah, it's good for everybody.
No, it's great. Yeah, we recognized Kevin the other day at the county board meeting for the work he did there. It's been fantastic. It's been appreciated. And like we were just talking, I was saying my dad will call from Florida and go, "Are you going to be on TV this week?" So, I mean, they watch it all over the country.
As a side note, I did want to mention this one more time, if you don't mind, Lance. Our friends at the ADRC gave us a heads up earlier. They're on site and meal deliveries are canceled for today due to road conditions and considerations. So anybody out there, if you know somebody who gets one of these meals, maybe stop by, see how they're doing, if they could use some food or something like that. At the very least, just kind of checking in on them.
Yeah, check them in. That's one of the great services that we provide. And, when we formed the ADRC a number of years ago, there was concern when we moved some of our Department of Aging work to a regional facility, how that would impact the community. And it's been nothing but a positive move ever since. We tend to serve a lot more people countywide, not just in the city locations, Wisconsin Rapids and Marshfield. So great program.
What are some of the things on at the top of your docket right now, you and the board?
Well, the first thing is, I want to thank all those county board supervisors who served the last 2 years. We have an election coming up on April 5th. So we've had the last meeting of our full board in the iteration it currently sits. You never know what will happen with elections. And one of the things we've had is, although we don't always agree on every issue, we've had a very harmonious board. They work together. They work together well. We get through those discussions and we have an outcome that's usually very positive and beneficial to the taxpayer. That's a little different than partisan politics sometimes, where you have to be on a specific side of the aisle on all issues, or you get crucified if you vary on one of them. So, I always laugh from a term limit standpoint. Every 2 years, there's term limits. And the beauty of local politics and county boards is no real money gets spent on elections. I think when people push for term limits, it tends to revolve around the amount of money that incumbents have to spend. I mean, it can cost you, $75,000 to run for an assembly seat. It isn't unusual to spend $200,000 to $700,000 for a state Senate seat. So then money comes into play. All you local officials out there, whether they be town, village, whatever, you're working for your community and you're basically working for free. So the one, I guess, admonition I'd have, the little bit of advice for the people out there in the public is look at who's running for office, what they stand for, and where you want to go. I had a conversation, we had a Wisconsin County Association Board of Directors meeting the other day, and it amazes me in some of the other counties, the lack of information that voters have. I had a person approach me and tell me he's running for county board because he doesn't like what his school district is doing, and he's going to change that. And I said, you're running for the wrong board. It's a school board. I've had other ones tell me they're running for office because they want to make sure that all the roads in the county or the municipality go back to gravel because they spend money on paving. Right. So I mean, there's some interesting takes out there.
It seems like one of those things that we shouldn't have to mention, but you're absolutely right. It needs to be said. Look into, do some homework. Not only if you are running for something, certainly, but even in the election process and leading into it, do your homework, look into things. We've been over this a number of times over the last 7-8 years or whatever, the importance of information and finding correct information.
And and that's the beauty of nonpartisan politics. In that political arena, where you have basically a D or an R after your name, you can be in agreement with 99% of the things that your party stands for, and you disagree on one issue somewhere, and you get eaten alive in a primary. They swear that you never did anything else. So That's interesting. So, that brings me back to your original question after thanking everybody for all the service they did is, what's pressing? Obviously, from a county's perspective right now, the biggest project's the jail. That's out there. Seating a new board and getting everybody in the right, on the right committees and moving the right direction. And then, there's the daily issues. You have 650, 700 employees. Every day you deal with some HR issues, some legal issues. But right now, it's getting the jail built, trying to come in on budget because of inflation pressures, supply chain, and some of those issues. We have a new courtroom that's going into the courthouse to deal with some of the issues we have there, any backlogs to alleviate those. So that's a prime consideration.
Yeah. How are things going with the jail? Like schedule?
On schedule right now. Yeah. I'm a little concerned when we get into the supply chain issues as things move forward. We're looking at some early procurement on some of the parts and pieces to make sure that we get those in and that we get them in a cost right now that we have a little bit of control over because we don't know where things are going. And, you're looking at, it's a little less than that, but 10% inflation. All you have to do is go to the gas station, go to the grocery store, and it cost me, I think, $87 to fill up my car yesterday. That wasn't a truck.
No, right. Yeah.
So that's out there.
I had to take a mortgage out to fill my tank.
Yeah.
I hear you.
And then, you have some of the other issues locally that we deal with. And you had some great guests on last month that filled in for me here in regard to the solar projects down in Saratoga, which is a big project. A lot of land use changes, a move to a more sustainable energy source. I'm not sure how that actually costs out, but that's a big project, and it's a lot of money that's going to come to the town, and it's additional revenue that comes to the county over time. So those will help offset some of those other issues. So you deal with those issues which are more long-term, 2-3 years in the making, and then the day-to-day stuff that comes up.
Yeah. Thank you for that rundown, Lance. Appreciate it. One of the things that I appreciate about talking with you over the year, or a couple of years we've been doing this, is I have no idea if you have an R or a D in front of your name. One of the things that you do to seem to approach the game, and it's personally your job as a chairman in that, is this idea of it is more about issue than party. It is more about people than party that. And I think that as we're getting ready for an election cycle here and that's one of those things that I like to note whenever I can. And I'm very lucky. I get to do that with pretty much every representative I have come in. But we're unique in this area with that. Wisconsin in general is unique. It's been a purple state for quite a long time. It's leaned one way or the other sometimes. But for the most part in its history, if you do it, a little bit of your homework, it's been this way. And I think we're kind of fortunate in that realm. We get to have our cake and eat it too, that kind of thing. But when it comes to the politics in general, you actually touched on something that I wanted to dive into with you a little bit and kind of like do a little homework on you with. Because of what I said before about that and the way you've always approached this interview at the very least, certainly, you and I don't know each other off air, but from what I've picked up and knowing you and everything, you seem to approach this position as this isn't about me. This is about my constituents. This is about the people. It's about my community. And I think that's a great starting point if you are thinking of getting into politics. More and more people are thinking about, hey, I don't want to just sit on the sidelines. I want to get in the game. Unfortunately, what we've seen, and I'm talking more about nationally, I'm certainly not talking on any case, local case or anything, but we do see nationally some people who are doing this to get their name out there. It's not so much to get an R or a D or to get an issue or anything like that. It's about, hey, it's me, and I want to get me out there. And it feels like the opposite of what politics is built on.
Yeah, one of the things I've said over the years many times is it becomes difficult when politician shouldn't be a profession. And it is when you get, to some extent at the state level, but certainly at the federal level. Feeding your family depends on that income. And those decisions somewhat are skewed or based on that thought process. It has to be, where am I going to live? How am I going to pay for food and housing? Where at the local level, most of your officials are basically volunteers. I mean, they might get a small stipend of, $50 a meeting or something like that to try to compensate for some of the time that they spend there. But that's a big difference. And, both state and federal politics revolve around policy. Really. I mean, the federal government, obviously, you have a military and you have an interstate highway system, but generally that policy comes down, and the vast majority of money that the county spends every year is allocated to administering those programs. So county government has to deliver the services. We're not necessarily debating if we should or shouldn't. That's already been decided. Right. And we are where the rubber meets the road. That's where the service happens. The state of Wisconsin doesn't have a highway department out there. The counties do that. Right. The sheriff's departments do, a lot of the patrol. You see the state patrol out there, but realistically, the sheriff's departments do most of that, or your local policing organizations. So it's a different way of looking at things. But when you depend on that income, to shape your life, to be able to pay for all those goods you need, I don't think there's any way other than to think that has to influence your decisions in some way. How do I stay on the side of the people that are going to fund me? And I can tell you at the local level, it doesn't. Now, that doesn't mean that 98% of the decisions made at both the state and federal level aren't probably agreed upon by both sides. I mean, it's one of those things where that's the stuff you don't see. Right. You see the messy sausage making stuff when there's disagreement. So, yeah, it's interesting, and that's the part that I think that is fun about local politics. I think, like most people who've been around in this business as long as I have, you've been recruited to run for different offices, if you want to call them at higher levels. And I don't find a lot higher calling working at those levels than working with the people closely that I represent and then having to deliver the service.
And with the curiosity of people getting into politics, that was why one of the things I wanted to do with you if we had time today was kind of getting into your story, because you do not seem like a career politician. You do not seem like somebody at 7 years old, you wanted to run for an office or something. But I could be wrong.
No, you're right.
Okay, so what got you to want to even do this?
I don't know that I ever had a want to do this. It's one of those you get recruited. And, I'm speaking for a lot of people in the community right now. You're involved in the community. I owned a couple of small businesses, and that creates a profile to some extent. And people see what you do on some of those other boards. And there can be many of those. I mean, it can be, Boys and Girls Clubs, United Ways. There's all kinds of charitable organizations out there. There's foundations. And your work gets noticed. And then people say, you might be a good fit. Now, so I was basically, if you want to say, recruited by some people that came out of the business community. And when I first came into office, Wisconsin Rapids, this area was, paper industry driven. Yeah. And a lot of the influence came from that industry. And I was a small business person, and probably work got noticed in some of those other arenas. And somebody said, "Why don't you run?" And I said, "No." And then they ask
Quick
again.
Answer.
And eventually they wear you down, and you say, "You know what? I could do 2 years for my community or 4 years for my community." And then you become involved, and you start to understand some of the process and some of the things that we do and how deep this is. Because I can tell you at the county level, the first 2-year term you serve on this board is educational. I mean, the amount of services and the different areas of your life we touch is you would not believe the number. I mean, somewhat astronomical. So there's a kind of a 2-year process. And, and once you learn what you're doing, and sometimes you end up, as a committee chair, and that, that's a route. And then in my case, a county board chair. And I've served as the president or chairman of the board of the Counties Association for 7 or 8 years now. You start to have I always call it influence. People think there's power. There's no power. I mean, I get one vote, just like everybody else on a town board, a county board, a city council. I get one vote. But if you're thoughtful, if you have integrity, if you're honest, if you do those kind of things and do your homework, you do develop some influence on issues. And that's the one thing, I talk about when I get to this, if I'm down in Madison or if I'm in Washington, D.C., where I get a few times a year, every time you walk into a politician's office, you can't have an ask. You need to develop the relationship. Kind of like as we're sitting here. And after you develop the relationship and you get to know the person, they know you're not coming in the office every time you're there asking for something. So, in my wildest dreams, I had this conversation with my wife not too long ago, call it as even a 21, 22-year-old. I never imagined that, a United States congressman or senator was going to call me and say, out of the clear blue, hey, Lance, what do you think about this? Or a local sheriff or a judge or somebody else might call you in to consult. You just, I mean, those are people you think you're never going to talk to.
Right.
But if you, if you're considerate, if you're thoughtful, if you're not a bully, if you kind of keep your nose at the grindstone and work hard, eventually have those opportunities. And so for me, it has just progressed in that way. And I have this conversation every 2 years, though, with my wife especially. How long do you want to do this? Because it is time consuming. For anybody out there who thinks that local elected official only goes to an hour meeting or 2 hour meeting a month, you're out of your mind. I'm going to be blunt. I mean, you often have 200, 300, 400 pages to read, to go through, the budgets, the monthly updates from all the department heads and all the committees. It really is a job. And then you got people that, some call to tell you they agree with you, some call to yell at you. And usually those that are upset typically don't have all the facts yet. And James, it's unbelievable how many people call me and they'll start arguing, sometimes with themselves, because I'm really not saying anything. I'm just sitting there listening. And I've had these conversations after 20 minutes without me saying a word. They go, yeah, I get it.
Where was that 20 minutes
ago?
ago?
So I think it just evolves. And, if I asked you the same question, I don't know, do you ever have a lifelong ambition to be, a radio talk show host? Right. The answer is probably not at 5 or 6 or 7. And somewhere along the line, whether I know you've been involved in community theater and some of those other, somewhere along the line, life takes you in a direction you didn't imagine.
I think one of the things you realize the older you get, it's not so much about what you dreamed to be as a kid, it's what you were meant to be. And kind of coming to grips with that and understanding it and being good with it, as far as where your path gets opened up. And for those people that are interested in getting into politics, maybe, running for board, running for, anything, any position, do you think that it'd be good for them to, like, instead of starting here, maybe get your feet wet and try this, or maybe go to a public board, county meeting or something like that? Really get kind of get embedded into the community of that to understand it a little bit more before just kind of throwing your hat in the ring.
Yeah, I have these conversations around the state all the time, and somebody will tell me, and it could be a fairly large community. For instance, I'm running for mayor, and I said, have you ever served in any public office before? Have you ever been a committee member in even the ancillary committees that report to cities or counties? And they'll say no. And I'll say, so you've never been an alderman, you've never been involved in any other board work, and now you want to be the chief elected official in any particular unit of government with zero experience. That's pretty tough unless you come from a very high-level business background and you're more in an administrative role. But you really need to have the buy-in of the people around you. Yeah, there are always some charitable organizations in the community where, frankly, if you wanted to be the president, they're always looking for somebody to step up. Yeah. And you could be this year. I mean, they go, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. But until you've surrounded yourself with a support group, somebody that's going to be there for you, you're going to be out there on your own. Yeah. And that's the difficulty. So my aspiration was never to sit in the chairs that I've had the opportunity to sit in. I often tell the people at the county level and at the state level, I just hope that somebody thinks I'm giving back as much as I'm getting. Because I look at this, it's a two-way street. Yeah. I learn as much as I ever give the other direction. And I think that's the big deal. You have an open mind.
Yeah. Appreciate all that insight and Nance. Thank you. You mentioned that there is an election coming up. Is there any information that might have changed since the last election that people should be up to date on?
Nothing real significant in our area. The one thing I would say here in Wood County is, we're lucky to have a fantastic county clerk. Our county clerk is Trent Miner. Trent served as the vice chair of the county board for years and then stepped into the role of county clerk, deputy clerk, and then clerk. And so we're lucky to have somebody who understands kind of both sides of the aisle and everything that we deal with as a board. And Trent works with the local municipal clerks to run elections. And, I never know what happens with data once it leaves Wood County. But in Wood County, I'm very confident in the election process, what happens and how it works. And we do a great job of getting out there and training those people and making sure that the election here is secure. Now, I'm not making a comment on anywhere else in the country or what goes on, but so nothing's changed in that respect. I don't think you're going to see any monumental changes on boards or in local government as I look around. If I go a little bit further, I mean, Marshfield is going to have a new mayor because they don't have a mayor right now. They have an
Right.
acting mayor. There's some of that. But typically in towns villages, cities, counties like this, where you get to know the local official, change doesn't tend to be broad and sweeping. It tends to be more gradual. You might have a seat change here, a seat change there. The county level, I think the maximum number of seats that we could have change would be 4. Through some of the elections out there. Do I think that will happen? The answer is probably not.
I mean, I feel like all this that you're talking about is a little like trying to pick a March Madness bracket. I mean, we don't know. We have no idea who's going to win, who's not going to. I'm just talking about the facts of voting, like where we go to vote and that.
Yeah, and I'm not picking winners and losers, but generally speaking, if you have an election, if you had 4 seats up for grabs, and if I said as the law of averages, 2 might change. I always get amazing. I sat in the Wisconsin County offices down in Madison. They have a whiteboard that basically covered a wall. And they were kind of predicting who were going to win our state legislative races a couple of terms ago. And I swear to God, they got every single one of them right. Now, they have their finger on that pulse. I don't delve into that. I'm not out in the community trying to influence.
Well, you start talking about that can influence votes. So that's why I want to stay away from
we
that
stay away
topic.
from that. But, generally speaking, you'll see that happen. We have one district right now in the county that we have no candidate who's announced. So, that's one. So, law of averages, could you have another seat? Yeah, possibly. But the voters decide that.
But as far as voting goes, there's no real change. Like if you've been going here to vote all these years, that's probably where you're going.
That's probably where you're going.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Okay. Thank you, Lance. Appreciate the time. Always thank you.
Are we done already?
Yeah, wrapped up. If people have follow-up questions, they want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Well, my contact information is on the county website. And I probably get a handful of calls every day from constituents out there within the county. Some I represent directly, some more as the county board chairman, but I always look forward to returning those calls and having those conversations. And I always look forward to coming in and talking to you. And I don't know where a half hour goes.
It always goes by so fast. It always does. Anytime you and I get together, always good to see you too. And I do want to make a side note. When Lance isn't able to join us, he always sets up a guest for us. Really appreciate that, man. It's very nice. It gives Pam a little less to do out there, and you know how much we appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's usually somebody who has more information on whatever topic you want to talk about than I have. So it's appreciated both directions.
Thank you for the time. And just one more time, Kev, to embarrass you once more, we appreciate you, man. We wish you the best. We'll be thinking of you, and we'll be following your career. So thank you for all the work you've done for our community, Kev. And, of course, to all of our friends at Wisconsin Rapids Community Media. Appreciate the work. We'll take a break. We'll welcome in our friends from the ODC and continue Morning Magazine here at WFHR, locally grown radio.